Back when we first started coming to Alaska, we asked the Lord to allow us to go to villages to minister. We said, God, we want to go to those out-of-the-way places people aren't beating the door down to get to. And we started seeking him about that. Then we started to tell him how to do it. Hello, some of you have been there, hadn't you? And in essence, God said to us, thank you, but I think I can handle it. You know, he's brilliant that way. We got a phone call back at our home office in Texas, and the man on the other end of the line said to us, we have heard your heart in Alaska, and if you will go, we will get you there. So one missionary pilot joined with another missionary pilot. They joined with a radio station and a commercial airline to fly us down to the Aleutian Peninsula area. Once they got us there commercially, they took us in the Cherokees and the Cessnas into the villages to minister. Now I can handle the Cherokees and the Cessnas. They've got windows you can see out of. But we got to the airport here in Anchorage early in the morning, went up to the desk and asked them where we might find our particular airline. They looked at us, they grinned real big. They said, down at the very end of the terminal. Sounded a little final to us, but we walked down that long terminal, noticing periodically there were native people sleeping in their sleeping bags on the left and right of us, waiting for their particular flight to arrive. But we got down to the very end of that terminal, and there we sat, those big windows all around us, just waiting for our flight to arrive. And suddenly, this dinky little thing, like a sports car, it came whizzing down the runway, turned around in front of us real fast, dropped a little piece to the side of the airplane, and pushed up a stool like you would buy at Walmart for the people to step out on. I remember looking at that thing, Dr. Owen, thinking, excuse me, God, you going to put us in that and shoot us across the sky for an hour and a half? That's exactly what he did. Now let me explain to you what this thing was like. It was this little tubular thing. Honey didn't have windows, had these little peek hole things you're supposed to look out of. We got inside that thing and we began to taxi that runway. It sounded like every nut and bolt would come loose in that thing. In fact, let me tell you, this little thing had a nickname and they called it the Tube. And as we began to taxi the runway and everything was rattling all around us, over to the left of Marcus sat a very highly intoxicated man. And as we taxied with that thing rattling, that man kept tightening his seatbelt tighter and tighter and tighter. And as we began to take off, that same man sat there and he kept going. It worried us a little bit. We wondered if he knew something we didn't know. But the rest of the group was living closer to God than I was, I believe, because when we landed, finally got off of that plane, they looked at me, they said, Mama, did you get you a good nap on the way? We sure slept good. I said, no. They said, what were you doing? I said, I was praying. I was saying, you know, God, you want to get somebody to talk to you, put them in a tube, shoot them across the sky for an hour and a half, and it'll work. There we stood before the three men who had come to pick us up, and their names were Ron, and Ron. We called them the do-ron-rons. As we stood before them, we began to discuss our flight in. We said we noticed not many of the native people were flying that airline. They kind of smiled. They said, yes, that's true. We said, why is that? They said, they're a little superstitious. We said, what would they have to be superstitious about? Said, had a little trouble with the airline last year. We said, you did. What was it? They said, a couple of them went down. I thought, honey, that's not superstition, that's smart. But how many of you this evening, listen carefully, have your feet now on solid ground? Let me see your hand. Now, how many of you realize that those of us who spiritually have our feet on solid ground, one day we're going to take a flight? How many of you know that? How many of you know it's not going to take an hour and a half to get there? How many of you realize there will not be someone intoxicated sitting next to you tightening a seatbelt? How many of you realize that we're not going to go by airplane? We're going to go by plain air. Aren't you looking forward to that? And this old